So, in this session, we are going to be exploring repeat patterns. Now, the way to create a repeat pattern is to have your artwork. I'm just going to make that one larger so you can see what I'm doing. And then drag that motif into your swatches palette. And then anything that you create that is a shape, you can then click on and it will have the repeating element inside the shape. And you can do various colorways of your shape, which I have done here. And again, I will just make one of these larger. And you can see that I have my original shape, but I have brought it into other colors and then drag the new version into the swatches palette, which gives me the various colorways that I have over here. One of them I have applied to my garment, and you can see because they're all close shapes, it does very effectively fill them. Now, as you can see, I've got some of them going in various directions because you are not going to have the same pattern direction going if a sleeve is, say, folded over. You're also not going to have it on the collar because the collar is going to be at a different angle from the main part of the body, right? I mean, when you're cutting out the garment, like if the bias or the grain is straight up and down, it's not going to be straight up and down on your collar because then it would be traveling straight up and down from the neckline to the edge. And you should be reflecting that in your shapes with your patterns. So the way to do something like that is to use our rotate tool. Now, what I want to do is the default is transform objects. So if I do that, it's going to twist my whole collar, which I do not want, right? I only want to twist the pattern. So instead of transform objects, I'm going to just do transform patterns. And you can see when I then go on my little angle rotation guide here, notice how it's shifting that over so beautifully, okay? So that is how you will adjust the shapes on items like your collar. If different sections of the garment are going in different directions, you can just very easily go in and adjust that using the rotate tool and only have transform patterns, uncheck transform objects. Next up, you can see that I have the pattern scaled differently on one section of my shirt than I have it on the other. Now, the way I did that was I used our scale tool. And again, if I hit scale 50% to make it 50% smaller, it would, work that way if I had transform patterns. If I did not have transform patterns, it would scale the whole thing. So I want to transform patterns. And you can see that I have transform objects turned off now, once again, because I don't want to make my pattern piece 50% smaller. I want to make the repeat pattern 50% smaller or 75% smaller, right? Go. you can see you can then scale and adjust various parts of your garment. Now, I have a video from an expert from Adobe who is now going to be walking us through various aspects of pattern manipulation in Illustrator. Okay, there we go. Take it away.
Aside from creating color and even gradients in Illustrator, which you've probably done before, you can make some pretty amazing patterns. From wallpaper or wrapping paper to packaging to architectural design elements, you can find examples of patterns everywhere. Now, to make a pattern, you can use your own artwork. In this tutorial, let's take this lemon artwork and create a custom pattern to fill this packaging design. Go ahead and select it by dragging across it. Now to create a pattern from it, choose Object, Pattern, Make. Illustrator enters what's called a pattern editing mode, and the swatches panel actually opens. The reason why that's important is because patterns in Illustrator are saved as a swatch, and we can easily apply them or edit them later. Click OK in this dialog box. All right, in pattern editing mode, you can see a gray bar at the top, which is how you actually stop editing if you want to by clicking Done. You can see that your artwork is in the center here, and it's repeated around. You should also see this little box around your artwork. This is called the pattern tile. Anything in this box gets repeated in the pattern. The pattern options panel over here is also open, where you can do all kinds of things and change a pattern and how it works. Now to start, let's give it a name. That way you name the swatch. I'll change it to lemons. By default, the artwork in the pattern tile is repeated in a grid, straight across, up and down, but you can change that in this tile type menu. Try choosing something else. I'm going to try like brick by row. You can see that the repeat is kind of staggered now. This brick offset actually determines by how much the centers of the tiles are out of vertical alignment. Go ahead and choose half from this menu, and you can see how it affects the pattern. Now the width and height here determines the pattern tile's size. If you make the width or height bigger, then there'll be space around the repeated artwork. Maybe if you want to add some more content to it, because you can go out here and draw and paste and do all kinds of things. If you make the width or height smaller, then the repeats will overlap. Now come out to the artwork, and like I said, you can still add, delete, or edit any of the artwork in the pattern. As a matter of fact, try dragging this leaf shape around, and you can see how it affects the pattern. Also notice that when I drag that, the box size doesn't change if I get the leaf kind of out of it. If you want the pattern tile to change as you move and edit pattern artwork, you can select Size Tile to Art here. Then if I move this leaf, you can see the pattern tile now surrounds all of the artwork. Let's try changing the appearance of the artwork. So let's change the color here. Click to select this blue marker scribble, and we'll change the fill. Go ahead and try a different color. I'll pick this lemony yellow. Now back in the options over here, you can see the horizontal spacing and vertical spacing. These actually control the space around the pattern tile. To change the value here, go ahead and click the words H spacing, for instance, and change the value. We're going to bring the repeats closer together. So I'll type in like -0.1 and press return or enter. The artwork actually now overlaps horizontally. Let's try the same for the vertical. I want to bring all of this a little closer and have a little bit of an overlap. So go ahead and type in like -0.2, press return or enter, and you can see there's a bigger overlap here. How things overlap, you can also adjust. So you can adjust the horizontal and vertical overlap here. Let's try this one. Try selecting the bottom in front option here, and you can see that the artwork below now overlaps the artwork above. All right, if you want to explore any of the other options, go ahead. I think the pattern looks pretty good. So when you're finished, you can now click Done in the bar up here, and go ahead and close the swatches panel as well. Now that you got your pattern made, you can apply it. So let's apply it to this shape. The way we apply a pattern is either as a fill color or even a stroke. So go ahead and select your pattern swatch. And there you go. You can see the repeat within the shape. Now, you're going to need to make changes, I could imagine. If you want to, you can double click the swatch here to enter pattern editing mode again. You can then make any changes to the artwork. You can change the options. You can do whatever you want. And once you're finished, click done. The swatch is saved and it's applied to your artwork. Now, one last thing here. I want to give you a tip. A lot of times I'll apply a pattern to something and the pattern is too small within or too big within. Now you can go back to the original pattern by editing the swatch, make changes to the artwork and things like that. But you can also scale the pattern that's already applied to the object. Let's try that. With this rectangle selected, go ahead and choose Object, Transform, Scale. Come in here and I want to make the pattern smaller maybe. So you can set a scale value like 70% or 80% or something like that. And to get it to transform the pattern and not the object, select Transform Patterns, not Transform Objects. If you turn on Preview, you can see it happen. Click OK, and you've got your pattern fitting perfectly. You'll find that patterns can liven up your designs. They can add texture and just do so much to it. If you look in the asset, we've actually got a whole bunch of different things you can try and experiment with. Why don't you try taking some of this artwork, creating patterns from it, and then applying it to these creations?
Thank you very much. Okay, so that was the Adobe expert who was showing us how to do patterns, which was very cool. One final thing I want to do is I actually want to change my button because I have this beautiful, vibrant shirt and I want to have a button that's closer in a vibe to what I've got on the rest of the shirt. So I actually took my original pattern piece down here and I altered it a little bit. Using the white arrow, I sort of dragged in some of the edges and I made sort of a buttony shape. And I thought that could be pretty cool for applying to my shirt. So I'm first of all going to reduce it. So it's button size. That's looking pretty good. And I'm actually going to give it an outline because I think I'm going to lose some of it against the background otherwise. So I'm going to actually do a white arrow. If you want to work inside a group, I like to just select something with a white arrow, and that allows me to select something that's in a group. So I'm going to pick a color and I'm going to just have a little bit of an outline on my button, maybe something a little darker than that. Maybe I'll do a dark purple. So it's nice and obvious. Let's do white arrow again. And I'm going to, there we go, get a nice purple. And I'm going to now drag that into my symbols. In this case, I'm actually going to select it and say new symbol. Okay, so there's two ways to do it. You can either drag it in or you can actually just select the artwork and use this little plus sign down here to create that new symbol. Now I'm going to select good old symbol number 1. I'm going to do a replace, and you can see that it is now going to give me my very cool new button that goes with my shirt so much better. Now, he made an interesting point about double clicking on your pattern piece and then being able to start playing around with the repeat, which I thought was very cool because there's various different ways you can set up your repeating pattern. And then when you apply that, you will get your new version of the repeat. Oops, I'm selecting my stroke. Make sure you are selecting your fill. That is a good thing to see. There we go. So there is my new pattern, and I'm going to give it a little bit of an angle. There we go. I want to transform my patterns so that once again, it would make sense with the way a garment would be hanging and the way the textile would look on it in terms of the cutting and sewing of the garment. Okay. So that is how to oops. I want to do that. Cancel. I want to size that up. Okay, so if you have a shape that is filled with a pattern and you want to fill it with something else, because I could keep trying to eyeball this, but I really just want it to look like the pattern that's beside it. So what you can do in that case is you can select the original shape. You can use your eyedropper tool, and you should be able to just grab the attributes of the whatever shape that you are clicking on. Okay. So that's very handy when you are recoloring a garment. But I like that. There we go. So this is repeat patterns in Illustrator.